Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Community and Environment Scrutiny panel. We'll be doing introductions shortly, but let's start with the housekeeping. Firstly, fire alarm. A fire practice is not expected. If the alarm sounds, can all present leave the building as quickly as possible by the way of the nearest exit. The designated assembly point is in the public square in front of CAS, beyond the fountain, away from the civic office. No roll call will be undertaken. Thank you. If anybody with mobility issues, please wait in the refuge area at the top of the stairs where the emergency evacuation lift is located, and use the intercom situated on the left-hand side of the lift doors to call assistance. Can I remind everyone to ensure your mobile phone is switched to silent mode, please, or turned off. This meeting will be audio-visually recorded and will be available to view on the Council's website and YouTube channel. Can I ask those present to use their microphones to ensure the audio can be captured, and that's using the red button on the device in front of you. Any members of the public entering the Council chamber are accepting that their images will be retained and broadcast by the Council. Can I check there's no members of the public here today? Okay, so let's start the introduction. So I am the chair of the meeting. I'm Councillor Gemma Coppy from Town Ward. So hi everyone. If I start with introductions from members.
Councillor Amy Dixon, Armfort Ward.
James Church, Bentley Ward.
Councillor David Nevitt, Edenthorpe and Girk Saddle Ward.
Councillor Rob Dennis, Town Ward.
Councillor Thomas New, Norton Ascombe Ward.
Councillor Emma Woodyman Rawlins from Wheatley Hills Intake and Clay Lane.
Jonathan Preston from Unison.
Thank you. And Chris?
Good morning, I'm Christine Rothwell and I support the Scrutiny team.
Thank you. And can I ask for instructions from the panel, please?
Hi, Kelly Hopkins, Service Director for Environment.
Hi, Peter Spratt, Chief Inspector for Roads Police and South Yorkshire Police.
Pete Thorpe, the District Commander for Doncaster.
Good morning, everybody. Phil Mavan, the Head of Service for Highways Infrastructure.
Good morning, Sam Whitehurst. I'm the Road Safety Manager.
Morning all, Claire Bignall, Head of Service for Regulation and Enforcement.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll start our agenda for today. Apologies for absence. Have we got any apologies, Chris?
Yes, Chair, we have an apology from Councillor Debbie Hutchinson. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't think we have any press along with public here today, do we? So we don't need anything excluded. Okay. And any declaration of interest from any of the ward panel? If you do have a declaration of interest, please declare this and the form will be completed following the meeting. So we'll support you with that. Just get in touch after the meeting if you do. Okay. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of August. This is to be agreed and seconded. Can this be agreed from our members on the panel? And seconded. Great, thank you. And item 5, public statements. Do we have any public statements? So that nicely goes on to our road safety agenda for today. And I understand there is a presentation.
These councillor, yes. Okay, I'll kick off then. Well, thank you for having us here today. So as I've already said, my name's Sam Whitehurst. There's also going to be some speakers here today who's going to support the presentation with myself. That's Claire Bignall. She's the Head of Service for the enforcement side of things. And then we've also got Chief Inspector Peter Spratt from South Yorkshire Police as well. So, an overview of road safety within Doncaster. Who's responsible? Ultimately, the council is responsible for the local roads, for the road safety. We do have some major networks running through Doncaster, and they are the responsibility of national highways. These major roads are the motorways. So you've got the A1, the M18, and M180. I don't think we've got M62 in our area. It's just a little bit out. Our main aim is to reduce the number of accidents and make sure all road users in Doncaster are safe. We do this by a few following approaches. That's either with working through partnership approach, road safety education, road safety engineering, and traffic management. Also, we use enforcement. Now, enforcement side of things is two different prongs. We've got civil enforcement and criminal enforcement. Civil enforcement is carried out by Doncaster Council, and criminal enforcement is carried out by South Yorkshire Police. Now, the partnership approach is what it sounds. It is a partnership approach, internally as well as external partners. The internal partners, we work with different teams within highways, as well as themselves as ward members, as well as the community groups, to try and assess the issues out there. We also work with our external partners, such as South Yorkshire Police, quite on a close relationship. We also have a very close relationship. It's linked with South Yorkshire Police, which is the South Yorkshire Camera Partnership, which my team have quite a lot of dealings with on a day-to-day basis. We also are involved in a working partnership, which is the South Yorkshire Safer Roads Partnership. You see the picture on there. Now, the Safe Roads Partnership is built up of councils from Rotherham, Doncaster, Sheffield and Barnsley. Also, National Highways sit within that, South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue, the Mayor, well, SIMCO as we all know it, which is the Mayor Authorities. And we all sit together and we basically look at the road safety issue at a county level, and that feeds down into our own districts of carrying that message down into our own areas. Now, the approach which is being set out by the South Yorkshire Partnership is basically what we've started to use is Vision Zero. And I'll explain that a little bit further on. But it is a partnership which we all come together on a quarterly. It is something what we're trying to get back up and running. It has suffered over recent years due to COVID and various different staff leaving, and this partnership is getting fully back up to running speed now. So we're getting some kind of good direction now where we're wanting to go and tackle road safety as a county level as well as a district level as well. Now, I guess the burning question to you is, what is Vision Zero? Well, Vision Zero is it's been adopted by the South Yorkshire Partnership, and it is on that board there. You can see there's 5 different areas. That's safe speeds, safe road users, safe roads, post-crash care, and safe vehicles. So that all kind of comes together to try and make up what Vision Zero is. Now, there is an ambition with Vision Zero. That's to eliminate all deaths and serious injury on our county roads. It's ambitious, don't get me wrong. But on our journey, we'll look to set to half this by 2030. Now, don't take it as that no one's going to have crashes. Someone's always going to crash on the highway. As long as there's cars driven by humans, there's always going to be a crash on the highways. It's what do we do to try and reduce people dying or seriously injured? And that comes from, is the road environment safe? Can we remove a lamp column right next to the carriageway what could cause serious harm? Could we move it to the back of the footway? Could we try and make the cars safer with the manufacturers? So there's lots of different things what we're trying to do there. And like I said, it is an ambitious approach. There's also the safer systems approach, which accompanies this. And this is kind of a move away from, in the past, we've looked at different hotspots, if you like. So our engineers have looked at hotspots, and we look at the data from the hotspots and try and dictate what is the problem with that particular hotspot, and we've treated those hotspots. And then we've tried to then move on to the next one. Well, the safer systems approach is trying to look at the network as a whole and say, okay, let's move away from hotspots, let's look at it. There's a perception there's a danger here, there's a perception here. And generally, if there's perception, there generally is something there to be looked at. However, it is a challenge for us because of budgets. You know, we can't just go out there treating every road in Doncaster. because we just don't have the budget. So there is an element to the degree of we still will be looking at things as a, if we are identifying there is a problem on a road, we will be still looking at it in that way, but we are looking at it in a different approach at the same time. Kind of touched on this with the traditional approach. I've kind of jumped ahead of myself there, but it is trying to move away from that and trying to look at it as a network, as a one, and looking at what the perceived dangers are by the general public. So we're trying to prevent mistakes from happening in the first place. That's either, like it's mentioned, trying to give that bit more of a runoff. So if there's a lamp column next to the carriageway, we're trying to remove that. And so someone's got a bit more of a, they might mount that footway. They still might have that coming off the carriageway, but they recover and they don't hit anything. And they drive on like nothing's happened. That's fine. That's, it's not fine, but no one's got hurt. No one's in a crash. Ensuring that any mistakes that do happen don't end up in a fatal. Again, I could go back to what I said earlier. I'm not saying there will not be accidents on the highway. There always will be, as long as people are behind the wheel and they do silly things behind the wheel. Either that's drink driving, drugs, whatever. There will always be something. We're just trying to reduce them serious and fatals down. So that kind of moves me into the areas what we're working within the team on trying to achieve this. And one of them areas is road safety education. Now, the aim of road safety education is to try and get into schools early doors and work through a bit like any education, feeding education into children from early doors, going into year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, etc., etc. Giving them a knowledge of when they get to a certain age, they should know how to cross a road correctly. They should know how to behave in the environment. Today's, we all probably remember the Green Cross Code. It's still there. It's still there. It's just being taught in a different way, which is probably a little bit more absorbable for the children. They've got new things to distract them, mobile phones, etc. So that leads us on to what is my team actually doing at the minute? Well, at the present minute, we are rolling out, which is Bikeability, and that is actually externally funded by a Bikeability fund. And we are currently working on year 4 and 5 across the borough of teaching 2,200 children how to cycle at level 2. Now, this doesn't teach them everything. The level 2, there's a certain criteria, which I'm happy to share after this meeting separately, which goes through certain criteria. And you've got to remember, it's that drip feeding. So it's not giving them everything all at once. It's giving them, and then hopefully we'll be able to come back fund independent the year after to give them that next training. So my team deliver the hazard awareness training to year 4 and 5 again. This has been scaled back over years, but they do fantastic work. We've taught 6,500 children hazard awareness of what to look for on the highway, and this is also being able to give children visibility add-ons. They don't wear high-vis vests, so we've identified that. We give them ruck straps to try and give them to try and make them more visible. We give them, little messages with key rings, various other things to try and make them more visible. Put in the bags, so they're like dangly things on the bags. So, when they're walking up the side of the highway and the nights like tonight, you're making them children more visible. Trying to teach them that using a mobile phone, looking down at the screen isn't a great idea when you're trying to cross the road. Look around. So we're trying to drip feed it in. We also deliver basically young drivers, so Drive for Life, to year 6 students, leaving, kind of going into college, sixth form if you would like, and trying to get to them before they actually get onto the roads, and teach them of the dangers of driving under the influence, wearing seatbelts. Believe it or not, that's a big issue what we're finding now, is people not wearing seatbelts. I'll come on to that a little bit further on what we're trying to do there as well with the police. Something which we've brought in to help because of resources is we've brought in a theatre education team, which is going to be delivering to our Year 7 students, which are basically, it's kind of that next step on. Now, the theatre education is run by young people, so it's not someone like me droning on in front of a load of kids who probably don't want to listen to me. It is something which is more hip, if you want to call hip, I don't know. But they're trying to deliver a message to the young students how to cross a road. When they're coming out of secondary school, it's probably the first time in their lives they're getting to a point where they go off to school on their own, they come home to school on their own. They're at that age where they've got to cross the road without someone holding their hand, maybe. So we're trying to, that theatre group's trying to engage with them. Now, we only can do what the schools would let us do. So if the schools don't want to work with us, then we can't go to that school. Simple as that. So I encourage anyone to get in touch with the schools if we're struggling to get into schools and try and get the heads to try and get us in. We have just, like I said, for this year coming forward and next year, so for the next 2 years, definitely, this education is going to be delivered. After that, it does depend on funds. So there's also an external thing, which is actually run by South Yorkshire Police at our Heliby site, and that's called Crucial Crew. And this is open to every Year 6 student in the county. And this is where they go. It is a fantastic facility, to be fair. They've got like a street set up, they've got pedestrian crossings, they've got scenarios, and it is a scenario base. It's designed not just to be talked to, it's designed to be interactive, because obviously children like to interact, and it's designed to try and get them interacting and learning about the difficulties and the safety issues. And the South Yorkshire Police are there talking to them, and it is a great venue. And again, if you're wanting to go along to that, come and talk to us, and you can. It's open for people to come and actually visit and actually see what we're trying to achieve there as well. So it is something which is open for you to have a look at. Same, by the way, same with the theatre education. If you are interested, speak to my team. Last year, a few councillors did come to the training. It was open to all councillors in our area. Come along, speak to us. Their support would be much helped in those scenarios. So road safety education, engineering. That's again within my team. This is what it sounds. It's engineering to basically solutions, really. As I've already kind of touched on, Doncaster has adopted the Safer Roads approach, which feeds into the Vision Zero. And we've actually had the chance to actually put this into actual working practice. And this has been as part of the A19 scheme, which the DFT highlighted to us, and we had to submit a bid using the Safer Roads approach to the DFT to secure the funds. So it has actually been put into practice. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, it was a bit of a head scratching. It was different to us because we've been so used to the approach what we've done in the past. It took us a little bit to get our heads around it, but we can see as engineers the benefits of it, but it did take a little bit getting around to it. We're also rolling out a 20 mile an hour within urban areas as part of the mayoral intervention initiative, and that's currently on track to be delivered by next year. We also do use traffic calming to enforce speed limits within urban areas, mainly within the 20 kind of areas, but we do use them on 30 mile an hour roads as well, if the data suggests not very good compliance, and we've got to try and drive that down. So we do put various things in there. You've probably seen them. We've used them since about mid-90s, now about 95 when they first came out, in different forms throughout the borough. You know, you can see there the what's called the crossroad hump. We also use kind of the little kind of pads. There's different things for different solutions for different road scenarios. That's also in the report where it's kind of got a list and kind of good understanding what we're using for. The team also investigates basically business cases and trying to bring together the funds to actually put major schemes forward. That's through accident stats or trying to do some other bits in that area. Ultimately, they try and bring in road safety into any of the designs which are getting put out there. That's including major highways projects. So traffic management, that also sits within our area. Now, you might think this gets a bit of a, really should change the title, but it is actually traffic management. See, there's temporary traffic management, which is run by a different team. And that's the temporary traffic management, what we all know about, traffic lights, roadworks, etc. This is what we call permanent traffic management. So this is kind of where we're investigating parking issues. And that's then tackled by traffic regulation orders. So that's the legal part of things, why we put yellow lines on the floor or restricting traffic. This team also look at putting one-way systems in. They also look at parking schemes, which we do all over the borough. Physical engineering methods, that's to stop people going down the street the wrong way, putting build-outs in, redoing curb lines, making it more easy to get out of junctions, various other things. There's, I could sit here all day talking about what that kind of team kind of go through. Then there's the traffic signals. Obviously, we all wear traffic signals, so these are the permanent traffic signals, what we find on our highway. There's also traffic signs, kind of jumped ahead there. There's traffic signs, what you see, that gives people the information they need to know where to go on routes, etc., what speed limits to do on the road. That team looks after all them kind of things as well. As part of the traffic signals is we are now introducing AI. Everyone, to be fair, I get a bit scared when people talk about AI. I think robots are going to take over the world or something, but it is trying to look at the new systems are looking at the traffic patterns. So in the past, we've had specific scripts what have been written for each traffic signal, and that's when we get the complaints that, oh, this light's not on long enough, this light's not on long enough, why are you giving so much green for this time, various other things. Well, that's because it's written on a script, and the script's got to then be rechanged by an engineer sitting there to actually rewrite the script. It's not adaptive to what's going out. Well, the new AI system basically looks at the traffic for each area and adapts that signalisation for what's going on live at that signal junction. So it can rewrite the script there and then. So to give you an example, Wheatley Hall Road, where the shopping centre is, we do get blockages coming out because we've got too much green time on the main road. Main road might not be that busy, so therefore we give a bit more green time to the shopping centre. So that's just been introduced on Wheatley Road. They're doing all the revamp on Wheatley Road. It is the rollout, and hopefully we'll be able to roll it out throughout Doncaster going forward. So we should try and reduce these complaints we're getting regarding signalisation. But don't be fooled. It is a computer program at the end of the day. Computer programs can fail, go wrong. They are signals out in the harsh highway. They will fail, but hopefully we get there pretty quick and get them sorted out. So I'm going to pass you over to my colleague here, Claire Bignall, and she's going to have a chat to you about parking services, well, enforcement.
Cheers, thank you. I think we're going to work together on the screen because he's got the button, so I won't do the whole next slides, please. So from a parking service on an enforcement perspective, the City of Doncaster Council, we enforce static parking, restrictions on the highway against parked vehicles under the provisions of the Traffic Management Act of 2004. Just to give you a flavour of what these type of restrictions and contraventions include is things like bus stops, double single yellow lines, taxi ranks. So in a recent joint operation, targeted work with licensing, parking enforcement and our colleagues at South Yorkshire Police, last Friday we issued 26 PCNs on an evening patrol in relation to sort of taxi ranks because we were getting complaints that the city centre taxi ranks were being used inappropriately. So we dealt with the vehicles parking obviously incorrectly in those. Clearways, disabled bays, loading bays, drop footway parking and many more. So the team themselves engage with communities and respond to various complaints that come into the service across the whole of the borough. And we do this by ensuring that we remain consistent and fair in the service delivery. All the officers are trained and hold the specialised enforcement parking qualification. So just to give some statistics, so for 23-24 period, the team dealt with 1,289 complaints that came into the service. So they're direct complaints, as well as going out and dealing with sort of our patrols, our reactive active patrols. And from that, in that same period, we issued 17,506 PCNs, and they've been pursued, obviously, by our processing staff that work for the parking team. And that's for various contraventions on and off street. So as mentioned earlier, for example, in my example, should I say, the enforcement team work in partnership with South Yorkshire Police, with our community colleagues, and we do quite a number of wide action days. So probably all of you from your own ward areas will have had times when we've been out doing enforcement. And that's, again, targeted work that comes in from the communities in relation to sort of parking issues in their ward. The team also, you may not be aware, or maybe, that we tackle persistent evaders. So for those that receive more PCNs for their incorrect parking or that are continuously concerning the safety of other highway users, including pedestrians, and when our sort of our in-house council's normal debt recovery procedures cannot be implemented. So the team actually organised for the removal and storage of these vehicles for obviously the PCNs to be paid. Moving on. Next. So in terms of digital enforcement, because what I just mentioned a moment ago is our officers out on the beat. So we've also got digital enforcement. So in May 2021, the parking services team decided to contribute towards addressing poor parking decisions around the school gates in a different way by procuring 8 digital enforcement cameras. So it's an innovative camera technology designed to promote a safer environment around the schools by reducing congestion, which in turn may help to contribute towards air quality as well. So the enforcement provision relates to the school keep clear. So that's the only thing that it relates to. It doesn't relate to any sort of single lines, double yellow lines in that area. And you'll probably know from yourselves that's right outside the school gate. We want to make that as safe as possible for the children. It only operates mornings and afternoons and in term time as well. It's a significant safety issue, and this is something that we get quite a lot from communities in regards to sort of wanting to protect and look after their children and make sure that parents, because that's who's doing it, are parking in more sensible locations. So the service works on intelligence gathered by the team and also by our colleagues in the Safer Road team, and complaints that come from the heads of school parents, etc. And we do this by understanding and prioritising where the use of the digital enforcement would be better located. Because sometimes actually having an officer present may work. So that's what we do. We engage with the schools and local residents to inform them of the cameras. So when we have located a particular area, the school's notified and all the properties in that area. Obviously, if you put a camera up, there's a bit of concern, isn't there, in respect of what's it looking at, who's it targeting, etc. So we explain all that. So we also engage with schools in a different way, where we offer alternative suggestions, because there's more than just the enforcement provision. There's things like the walk to school campaigns, walking buses, and I'll use the hard-hitting picture there that's shown on the presentation in terms of this was a designed school photo some years ago from Swansea School. It hit BBC and it got a significant amount of views on it. As you can see, it's quite impactful. But these are things that we suggest to schools to work with them in terms of looking at other options to support their school. So since May, and since introducing the digital enforcement cameras, various schools, as you're probably well aware, there's over 150 schools in the Doncaster borough, and we've only got 8 cameras. So we work on where's the need for them. We've issued over 6,000 PCNs, and we've obviously pursued them as well. But it doesn't stop. You know, people are opportunists. So when there's no enforcement officer, when there's no enforcement camera, they may decide to take the option of, parking inappropriately. So that's where we continue to work with the schools in terms of those other ideas, as I mentioned. And as I mentioned, we do continue to do reactive patrols. So that's when we're informed about of areas of concern, we go out. And as you can imagine, when you've got an officer present, there's very little enforcement that takes place because everyone chooses to park in the right locations. It is hoped that digital enforcement and other educational measures will encourage motorists to reconsider that need to drive to school and choose alternative means, really. So that's it from me. So I'll pass over now to Peter from SYP to discuss enforcement remit from your perspective.
Thank you. Sam, if you just want to put everything up on the slides. And then so South Yorkshire Police have over the last 12 months refocused in terms of our delivery around roads policing. So we have renewed our casualty reduction plan, which is very much focused on all aspects of the safe system approach which has been described to you. As part of that, my department has just over 50 roads policing officers that cover the county, and again some in addition to that fulfil the investigations in relation to then fatal and serious injury collisions that follow. Part of our plan for the casualty reduction plan in 2024 is to mobilise that wider resource within our neighbourhood policing footprint across the force, of which South Yorkshire Police has recently been recognised as good in terms of prevention and problem-solving policing. So that's the journey and the direction that we seek to take this, to work alongside your local neighbourhood teams who understand the local issues and concerns. And again, it means that we can respond to major incidents that require our initial attendance and management, should that be a serious or a fatal collision. But equally, where the officers have capacity, they will work with and build relationship with your local police officers and PCSOs, conducting joint patrols with those officers, and again, to be able to react in a more dynamic way to those local issues of concern. Uninsured vehicles is one of the concerns on the road in terms of the 5 pillars of the safe system approach. Safe road users and safe vehicles is 2 of those strands. So if you can consider the mindset of the driver who doesn't have insurance, an MOT or tax on their vehicle, that tells us a lot about the attitude of that driver and therefore the risk that they will present on the road. Statistics would say that those drivers are 5 to 7 times more likely to be involved in what we call a KSI collision, a kill or a serious injury or an injury collision. So there is a national operation called Operation Tutelage, which we use all technology available to us in terms of number plate recognition, and we can effectively understand the lifestyle of those vehicles, and they are highlighted to my officers who go out to proactively intercept those vehicles, and the vision is that we seek to take those vehicles off the road before they cause any harm. Statistically, if you look at the number of road users versus the number of officers, we are always going to be pushing against a real demand in terms of the law of the statistics there. But we have seen some examples in South Yorkshire when we've reviewed collisions and serious injury collisions. There was one in Rotherham as we looked to just renew our approach to Operation Tutelage, where we had 2 young drivers, 2 male drivers, 18 to 25, not wearing seatbelts in a vehicle that had none of the relevant cover in terms of insurance, MOT or tax, and both males collide with a dry stone wall, ejected from the vehicle, and both with catastrophic injuries. So that is a prime example where that vehicle has thankfully collided with a wall, but still we have 2 young men that really need to be stopped before that harm is caused. You'll see just on the right-hand side of the slides, and I'm sorry that I've not made it bigger, but the 4 dark blue bubbles are the national policing, roads policing NPC road strategy. So the central bubble is around policing our roads together, which really covers a lot of what you've heard in terms of that partnership approach. And again, we've got 4 different strands to that. So preventing harm and saving lives is at the top, which is our primary focus, where we that is in line with our core purpose. The dark bubble to the right is tackling crime. So our balance is always that we need to deny the road network for criminal use. When you look nationally, criminal commodity is most likely to be moved throughout the country on the road network. And that could be anything from matters relating to drug supplies, the most obvious, organised crime, firearms criminality, right through to modern slavery and counter-terrorism concerns. So we have a strategic policing requirement that we need to have the capability to deny the road of criminal use and to use the same officers to implement tactics and take those criminals off the road, of which we see multiple examples per week. There is an overlay with that and road safety, because generally when we consider stolen vehicles then which are being driven in a reckless manner, generally by people who aren't qualified to drive them, young offenders who potentially enter into acquisitive crime, those thefts can then result again in death or serious injury, and we have seen examples of that in South Yorkshire and across the country. Driving technology and innovation is something that we continually work with. So we are looking at ways to use connected vehicle data. It's more and more with as technology comes, it's a data-rich environment, and we are liaising with partners just to see if there's anything else we can access to drive our decision making and our problem solving. Which doesn't mean that we have to wait until the consequence of a collision then to simply be driven by collision data alone. There's some good examples of that in relation to car meets or car races, where we see these car enthusiasts come together in large groups, and generally they may come to admire each other's modified vehicles, but then the poor behaviour that we see falling out of that is the road being used as a racetrack. So we are liaising with a private provider at the minute who will look to use TomTom data and similar to see if there's any additional data that we can pull from connected vehicle data to see if that can support our problem solving efforts any further. And then the bubble to the right is the left is changing minds, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we are seeking to embrace in terms of behavioural change. And we're trying to do that in lots of different ways. There are parts of the county where we see public health officers engaged, and again, behavioural change campaigns being pushed through in terms of the comms. We've been much more bold in our comms strategy. So there's a particular case in Doncaster where a young lady was imprisoned for 9 years, having caused the death of another young female on Wheatley Hall Road in August 22. And the circumstances of that is that the driver of that vehicle and her friend as front seat passenger were both using social media and their mobile phones while driving at extremely high speeds. Went through a red traffic light at 78 to 83 miles per hour and effectively fatally injured front seat passenger of a vehicle that was turning across their path where they had the right of way to do so. So that was a Doncaster example where we have sought to tell the story much more behind that awful event, because there are the front seat passenger was left with significant injuries. The young driver, who through very poor decision making, has effectively now got a significant prison sentence, but equally a lifetime of guilt in terms of what's unfolded, and then the family that's lost a loved one. We pushed that out on our channels, and that went national in terms of the message, and I think that's really important for us to do that, to try to deter such behaviour then again on the roads, and to try to work to change the minds and influence the minds of young drivers in particular. And I think that's a very unique case, because the perception is generally that it's young male drivers in the 18 to 25 bracket that present that risk, but actually it goes to show that with social media and that carelessness that comes with the distraction of using devices, that it's really anyone that's behind a wheel. And I think as technology evolves and everyone's used to having a phone in their hand so often, that's something that really concerns me. So in relation to the car mates, and I think that was something that was particularly asked about in the advance of this meeting, Operation Retro Mike is we like to give things operation names in the police, which is the same everywhere that you go. But ultimately, that is our plan. It gives us some tactics to implement should we have then one of these meets that descends on South Yorkshire. We have seen some really good success in recent weeks where my officers have effectively cast the net and and brought a number of these vehicles to a stop, and we're taking enforcement action against them. Only this weekend, if you look on South Yorkshire Police social media channels, you will see that we've effectively closed off a section of the Durham Valley Parkway and trapped a number of those drivers, where we then start to use all powers available to us. That includes nullifying insurance at the roadside if there's modifications to the vehicle that haven't been disclosed, right through to using legislation such as the Police Reform Act, which is around the inappropriate driving and careless driving of those vehicles in an antisocial manner. We're working with the neighbourhood teams across the force where those problems present to consider problem-solving plans and then further things that we can do to deter that behaviour. And one of the things that we're looking at in a couple of other parts of the county at the minute is where we see persistently the same people coming back. We will consider orders and interventions against those people, and again looking to use the wider enforcement capability of the partners as well. So should those people live in the vicinity, that would open up to housing enforcement, but equally criminal behaviour orders and other orders to manage future behaviour. There's additional operations that we use to target potential threats on the road. And as mentioned at the start of the meeting, the strategic network that you have coming through the borough within Doncaster is something that's actually very heavily targeted by my officers, who work closely with National Highways, DVSA, and again UK Border Force. So you'll see that some of the results just from this year, we've had 405 tickets issued, 7 drivers reported to court, and 130 vehicles prohibited until faults rectified, with those £90,000 in fines being particular to heavy goods vehicles or commercial vehicles that are being used on the strategic network. So that's what you call a graduated fixed penalty, where we're stopping lorry drivers, with, again, frightening examples where we've had lorry drivers that are coming through South Yorkshire who have been driving continuously for 17 hours. We only need to look in recent history. In Durham, in recent years, there was a catastrophic incident where such a vehicle has come into the back of standing traffic and killed 5 people in one incident. So when we look at the threat that size of vehicle presents on the road, then that's why we will target those vehicles. And again, there's consequence for the businesses that are allowing those vehicles to continue and not comply with tachographs and all of those measures that are there to keep other road users safe. We work with the National Highways and use an unmarked heavy goods vehicle, which you will see generally every time we do it. It ends up on national media, where we have from a position of a vantage point in a heavy goods vehicle from the cab, we're able to film down into other road users' vehicles where we see concerning behaviour, which has gone from everything from male grooming, people trimming beards, right through to people watching films while driving on the motorway, and other frightening scenarios like that. So again, we run a number of intercept vehicles around that, where the evidence is captured from the cab, and then we send our officers forward then to take enforcement action against. And generally, if we do that over a period of a week, we will see 300 to 400 enforcements just in that week alone, using that tactic alone. So there's lots of proactivity. And I can assure you that lots of that, particularly the DVSA work that works in the Doncaster borough. The image to the right is an example of how we deliver against the full calendar of operational delivery. So there's a national calendar that gives campaigns that have seasonal issues or trends. So the Drink Drive campaign being the most obvious, when we see, particularly in the summer months or in and around Christmas, where we will focus on those matters and then try to drive our enforcement and again our comms around that to deter that behaviour. We are continually looking to extend the reach and the impact of those tactics. And again, from a drink drive perspective, our intention this year is to look at persistent offenders as much as just seeking to stop road users and breathalyse at the roadside or use drug wipes. So that calendar shows that really throughout the 12 months, there's generally every month there's a significant campaign that's ongoing. And again, we see some very good results against those. Post-collision response is one of, it's sometimes called different things. I think it was post-crash care in the image that was shown around the safe system. We obviously attend and manage fatal collisions, and since I've been in post in September last year, we have implemented a post-fatal debrief, effectively, where if we have a fatal collision, we will, within 24 hours, come together with Sam and the team, as well as internally to look at the consequence of that in terms of the immediate actions, priority actions for us, but equally to consider if there are any engineering or environmental factors that we can share that information as early as possible with partners, then to ensure that there's a holistic approach and review of what has happened and how can we prevent any recurrence. The approach to media releases I've mentioned, so that case in particular that saw the 9 years imprisonment, and again, the reach of that was 600,000 views across 2 social media platforms alone, and it went much wider than that with the link that's shared. Some overview really of the enforcement. So the Safety Camera Partnership is headed up by a colleague of mine, Scott Durney, who provide a really good offer across the county. In the last 12 months alone, there's been just short of 2,500 traffic offence reports have been issued. So that's where my officers will stop somebody at the roadside and issue them with a ticket in old language. That's electronically submitted and then processed by the Safety Camera and Ticketing Partnership. So that in Doncaster alone, you see that there's a good reach. The officers from the camera partnership have processed using the static cameras, the mobile cameras, 3,771 speeding offences during that same period. And they have a number of mobile and static sites that can be used across the borough. That doesn't include then if my officers conduct, as part of the casualty reduction work, if they conduct roadside speed enforcement. And again, with Mr Thorpe's resources and the local neighbourhood teams within the borough, we will then be training those officers along to use what's called a Unipower speed gun at the side of the road as well, where there is the option for enforcement. And my officers will come and work on those local neighbourhood teams on days of action, such as Operation Duxford and those operations that you might recognise as repeated operations that are branded. The Community Speed Watch, we have one of 3 pilot groups in Doncaster, which covers Micklebring and Braithwell, one covering Wadsworth and other Tickhill. These groups have conducted over 70 Speed Watch campaigns, resulting in 6,000 vehicles being checked and 800 offences being detected. And that is, we've been in the pilot phase for that because that's in addition to core business. So those schemes in particular have been run by Scott's team, and he has a senior command team paper that will go into our executive officers to consider the resourcing required to roll that out on a more wider basis. The view of Community Speed Watch in its truest form should be that can run independently of having a police officer present. So that's what those pilot groups are looking for. So effectively the implication for us within policing would be that we can train those people, conduct the risk assessments, provide the equipment, and then allow that autonomy to those groups. And that would be in addition to then any concerns that come through. There's good internal partnership between the safety camera team and my team. So should they identify an issue within the Community Speed Watch, for example, that needs more robust enforcement, then I have the capacity to be able to send 1 or 2 of my units down to start to conduct that speed enforcement at the roadside, or to empower the local neighbourhood team to do that, which is something that we're still in the early stages of developing then across the county. Is there another slide, or am I done? Done. And that's it. Thank you.
No, thank you for the presentation. It's been very interesting. I know our panel have quite a few questions, and we've tried to kind of put them together as part, like there's the same heading as you've done in your presentation as well. So I know there is a question on the Vision Zero. Is that from you, Councillor Thomas New?
Thank you for the presentation. Do we have a starting number point for the 50% reduction?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor. Yep. So the stats go on by year. So the year the stats are from 23. So for South Yorkshire wide, we've got unfortunately we've got 39 what have been killed, seriously injured. We've got 802. For Doncaster, we've got 5 which have been fatals and 211 which have been serious. So So that's what we're kind of working from at the present minute.
Thank you.
If I could add to that, sorry, as well, the Vision Zero county-wide, when the strategy was introduced in 2022, there was a target of 397 in the kill and the serious injury category, and we still sit just over 830 in the last full calendar year. So we still have a lot of work to do between now and 2030 to achieve that reduction county-wide.
Thank you. Yeah, there's been some really bad ones this year. From the crucial crew, do we have numbers for like the uptake and stuff for schools and stuff like that?
We can say that nearly every child in Year 6 across South Yorkshire is engaged through that scheme. So generally, the way that we discuss that in the internal meetings is to chase any schools that aren't engaging, and I'm confident that it's 100% in Doncaster in terms of the schools that are coming on board with that.
If you would like, Councillor, I could get you the information. We can contact the team who run it and find out what the actual uptake is for Doncaster, if you would like.
Yes, please. It'd be good for all councillors as well, if there is schools in our wards that aren't signing up or doing stuff. Have we lost that connection since we've sort of gone to academies? We're getting into schools, and that goes for the bikeability programmes and everything like that.
I wouldn't say we've lost it. Due to staff resources, we've just actually taken on a new road safety coordinator, and the role of that job is to coordinate our road safety approach, our road safety education approach. And if there is schools which we're persistently not having much luck with, then we've had situations where we've contacted the councillors, and councillors have been given us a different road into the schools. So that's been happening recently. But obviously there's been some changes within the team. So up to press, we're just kind of resetting and going forward from now.
Thank you.
Okay, has any of the councillors got any questions on the Vision Zero? Can I suggest? Oh, yes, go on, David.
Thank you, Chair. It's just about people's perception of road safety and accidents. People see somebody driving at excessive speed, and there is an issue where they think that somebody's going to get injured by these actions. How do you then approach this when it doesn't happen the same place every day or each hour? There's various things that are happening. How can you have an overview and a strategic view on how somebody is driving badly in an area and how the community feel about that?
Yeah, it's difficult because there are lots of different variations and factors that can contribute. I think the thing from my perspective is around us being consistent and persistent in terms of our enforcement and our communications. So, much like the example that I've given around car meets and the impact of that, we have seen over the last 3 weekends examples in South Yorkshire where that's an issue. So again, part of our morning meeting this morning with my staff is that we will then push that message out on social media channels and seek to use the reach that we have to influence those individuals. Where there is a particular issue that's more prevalent, then the thing we can do then is start to dig into that and use the problem-solving approach. And part of the way that we would do that would look at what information is available, and then consider temporal analysis within that. So if there's certain days, times, and similar when these issues are occurring, then we'll seek to target those days and times. And again, if it's a demographic issue in terms of road users, we will then consider how we can influence those particular individuals. So, we're looking at the minute around young drivers, and then is there opportunity for us to work with driving instructors locally and influence minds in that regard coming through.
So the perception out there in the areas is that if there's an accident happens, it could have been fatal on their road, on their street. And we've got cars now that are far more powerful than they used to be 20 years ago or even 30 years ago. And so they look at it as it's been a bad accident and it could have been fatal, and yet nothing comes over as being done to alleviate that situation, because it's going to cost a lot of money to put in facilities. So how do we square that circle?
With my team, we've mentioned that we work partnership with the police. We obviously look at the accident, we get the stats, the details, and we have to then look at what was the common factor. Have we got a common factor with the road? Is there something wrong with the road, or was it just driver error? And it does depend on that scenario to what treatment we're going to do. If it was just pure driver error, we've heard about uninsured drivers or whatever. If it's something along them lines and it's been someone driving quite carelessly, erratic, and there was nothing really to do with the makeup of the engineering of the road, there's sometimes not much we can do. Sometimes if you put items into the highway, they can have an adverse effect. They could launch the car, they could do something different. You know, sometimes we get asked for putting bollards somewhere. The bollard could actually launch the vehicle and make the accident more severe. And so it goes back to that safe systems again. You know, how can we look at the road, work with the police, and try and tackle it that way? I've just mentioned about the road safety coordinator. She's actually right now engaging with the local driving instructors, getting out there, trying to get literature to the driving instructors, because they're the ones who are teaching these young adults how to drive. So we're trying to. It's never going to be an easy road, and there's no simple answer of saying we're going to do this, we're going to do that, because it'd be wrong of me to say that today, because we've got to look at the circumstances around it, work with partners, and if there's something to be done, trust me, we will do something. We're all, you know, all my officers work within Doncaster. We've all got loved ones, we've all got relatives, so we're all invested in Doncaster. So it's not we don't want to do something, it's sometimes that, is there anything what we can actually do?
Okay, let's move on to the next section. I've got here road safety engineering. So I think Councillor Amy Dixon, you've got a question.
Hi. This is for Sam, I believe. Could you provide background and the process on accessibility for disabled road footpath users? And do staff members, do you know when you're doing these projects, do the planners, designers have relevant up-to-date knowledge of accessibility requirements? And will it be something that's included in the safety policy moving forward? So a bit off the roads, but still safety.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to say that, yeah, my designers since '95 have been including accessibility into the designs. What was the introduction of the DDA compliance, and also the tactile paving guidance came out in '95. So we have been including them in our project since about '95. Throughout the time of '95 onwards, there's been different kind of guidance notes from the DFT what came out. The most up-to-date guidance is from the DFT was 2021, which gets put into the designs. There was the Equalities Act, what got passed in 2010, which basically kind of integrated the DDA and made that kind of redundant. And then the Equalities Act moving forwards is what our design teams look at. So every design we do, we bring that into it. Now, I know personally on schemes I've been involved in the past, I've been involved with groups of individuals or groups who represent the visually impaired, etc., to go and actually look at the scheme before I actually start designing, to get an idea of what's going on. And I do know the major projects team, when they're doing the major projects, do get involved with these teams, these groups, early stages, and it gets put into the design at early stages. Kind of like jumping forward, because there's another question further down, that gets picked up onto what's called a road safety audit. So the road safety audit is actually done by an independent an advisor. So it's not done by the council. It's done by a accredited independent company that comes in. And if we haven't looked at these areas, the designers missed them for one reason or another, they will be highlighted in those designs. And then there will be, the designers got a legal responsibility then as part of a road safety audit to actually put a response back to the road safety audit team, because it basically makes up a legal document after that. But yes, answering the question regarding the road safety policy moving forward, my team currently are working on some different strategies. One thing what I highlighted when I came into the team late this year, May this year, was the lack of policies and the lack of clarity to the general public of what we do. So there's a number of policies which are currently being drafted at the present minute, and one of them is around accessibility.
It'd be great to see that.
Yeah, when it's all kind of drafted and it's gone to the senior staff and Joe Blackham and various other things, it'd be circulated around.
Can I just jump to my other question? What is the time frame for new highways projects to receive the road safety audit generally? And do we not do like quality impact assessments?
Yeah. So I'm trying to explain this road safety audit process to yourself, and that should try and answer the question. The road safety audit process is there's a stage one, which is basically what's called a desktop. So basically it's the kind of aspirations of the scheme, what the scheme plan sets out. So it's not a detailed design, it's basically an aspirations. And at that stage, it's the road safety auditor won't be going on street, it's a desktop, and they'll be highlighting anything which doesn't probably comply to regulations or to guidance. And then that gives the opportunity for the designer to go back to the road safety audit team and explain the reasons why, or what, if they accept the reasons being given. A stage two is basically when it's getting built. So when the actual scheme's gone through its detailed design, and then the road safety audit team actually visit the site on the actual building stages of it and look at the detailed design and make comment throughout the detailed design. A stage 3 safety audit is when the scheme's complete and we've moved off site, and then a auditing team go through it, and if there's issues which have been missed or that it's been built incorrectly to what the plan is, this will be highlighted within that stage 3 safety audit. And then at that stage, it will be for the designer to then make amendments or make comments to the road safety report. And again, it is a legal binding report, the road safety. So once you go through it, it is something what we can't just decide at one point to ignore it. We've got to go through the process.
So if somebody makes a recommendation at stage 1 or stage 2, they would have to be rectified before stage 3.
Yeah, if the designer agrees with the recommendations, you've got to sometimes remember that sometimes the recommendations are just someone's opinion. They're not guidance. They're not part of the design guide. It's someone's recommendation, and if a designer can design it in, or if it's what can be done at that stage, then yes, it will be looked at before stage 3. And if it hasn't been included, and the designer's put a response saying they would look at it, and it hasn't been, then it's down to the designer to respond in stage 3 to say why it hasn't and what they're going to do about it.
Okay, Councillor Thomas Moon.
Thank you. What elements do local authorities consider before speed limits are reduced on dangerously perceived roads? Do fatalities have an impact in the decision making? So if a road's one in my area, the A19, if a road's got 20 crashes on but no fatalities, compared to 1 crash with fatalities, how does that measure up, sort of thing?
Yeah, regarding speed limits, there's no one answer to give. It's not that we wait for fatals. It's not that we wait for injuries. We do go on data, so it is data driven. Also, it goes on working with our partners, with South Yorkshire Police. If it goes back to that other question which Councillor Nevitt answered, put forward, was regarding a perceived. If the data is not showing that the accidents are to do with speed, they're to do with people's education side of things of it, then lowering the speed limit probably won't have an effect. But with the safe road systems, it is recognised, lowering speed limits can obviously reduce the seriousness of the accident. But at the same time to that, we've got to get buy-in from our partners from South Yorkshire Police, because ultimately they're responsible for the enforcement. So we have to look at it in various different things through the data, and what compliance are we going to get with reducing the speed limit? You've got to put a realistic side of things on road safety, and when we're putting things in, is if you've got a road which is a national speed limit, drop it down to 30 mile an hour. Are people going to do 30 mile an hour without only putting a sign up and some paint? Probably not. So we've got to look at it different ways, and we've got to work with different partners to get the enforcement, or if that's actually going to cause any kind of effect. We also got to work with guidance, what would DFT give us on certain roads, and what the environment is, because generally a driver will adjust the speed to the conditions what are there. You know, if it's a built-up area, you would hope most of the compliances people do reduce the speed when they're going through built-up areas. In a rural road with fields either side, people would perceive that as lower dangerous, so that they want to go quicker because that's what they want to do, because it's down to perception of what the driver's going to see as well. So there's loads of different things we've got to look at. There's no one thing, what we say, right, then there's loads of accidents, we're going to drop the speed limit. It's, can we do other things to try and stop that, or can we do it all as joint scheme?
I think that's where we might be missing a trick, because the perception and the amount of accidents, the A19 perfect example. So we've just had the speed measures drop down to 40 on the Bad Junction on Ouston. Years and years and years gone by, loads of crashes. It's like we were waiting for a fatality. So we're getting loads and loads of crashes, and we're getting lucky. That's all we're doing, we're getting lucky. It's A19, HGVs use it, cars use it, it's a five-way junction, sort of. Council and police wanted to reduce it by 10 miles an hour. Pointless, absolutely pointless. So it wasn't until councillors and Ouston residents started raising concerns that we've then implemented a 40 reduction, and we've still had crashes. So even then we don't think it's gone far enough. But by dropping it to 40, hopefully we do avoid them fatalities. There haven't been any, touch wood. But the perception is everyone can see that there's the amount of crashes there each year. But as a council, it's took 20 years to do something about it. So that perception is, council aren't that bothered. That's what it sees as a resident, and we get it from the residents that no, it's been done. And the people in Ouston who live there and got to pull out that junction, they're telling you something needs to be done. They're the ones who use it every day. So we can look at data all we want, but the people who it affects the most, we've got to start listening to them. We all get it in neck that know what's happening, so they need to be listened to and we need to be listened to, because we're on them roads. So I think we are missing a trick with perception and judging the data and stuff like that. And then we've got a separate one. So I had 3 fatals on one road in Asken. So that were a drink and drug user on Boxing Day many moons ago. So I wanted speed reduction on there. It's outside of school, busy built-up area, traffic's a nightmare. But because the fatals were a one-off drink driver incident, that then doesn't weigh up because it's an outlier. But the speed reduction, the people want it in the area, they want the speed humps because it's a school, and 20 is plenty, and we've got 20, but everyone's still speeding. So we're not getting listened to, and we've had 3 fatals, and it just seems that around schools, we just don't seem to get listened to enough. As councillors, especially for me, I don't know what everyone else is like, but the perception I get and from the residents I get is that we don't go far enough when we should do. And I know we might struggle to enforce the speed limit, but we need to try something.
Yeah, some good points there, Councillor. I do take them on board, and we are changing our approach to many different things. Of years gone by, there's been maybe mindset in the past, which we're hopefully breaking. You know, we've got the new Vision Zero, which we're hoping is going to change the perception, change our way of engineering. I can't talk about individual cases because I don't know the true background on individual cases, but we do have to follow certain guidance, which from the DFT, which shows us how to set speed limits. So it all depends on the scenario of the roads. You know, the A19 is a good example. Like I say, it's very straight with a very complex junction in that area. So it is very hard to engineer something into it without doing some major engineering project. And it's like I mentioned, we need, you know, if we drop the speed limit down like we have, are we going to get compliance? And that's something we have to work with, because ultimately, if we don't get compliance, all we're going to get is more complaints, more people complaining that they're speeding. Because before it was national, now it's 40. We might have had, you know, maybe 95% compliance at the national. Now we've probably dropped it to 40. We might only get probably 70% of compliance. So we've got to look at it. We've got to look at how do we actually engineer that speed limit without need for South Yorkshire Police, because as you've heard from Peter's team, they can't be everywhere, and we can't just, there's certain criteria around, because the first thing is speed camera, put a speed camera up. Well, we have to have criteria set out, you know, because of the massive backlash of these enforcement cameras has resulted in us having to justify why we're putting these speed cameras on a certain road. And yes, you're right, it has to come down to why you're putting them on that road, what accidents are you trying to resolve, and then it does go to that. So it is something where we are restrained by regulations and guidance to a certain degree, but also we've got to work with our partners. We don't want to put something in what's not going to be realistic and not enforceable.
Just to come back on the being justifiable, we're justifiable in the amount of accidents. So the A19, we've had accident after accident. That's why it's justifiable. So the speed reduction and the speed cameras, the answer's there. It's to reduce number of crashes. So that's got to be a thing. Why? So to argue about the justifiable of it or not, well, yeah, we're doing it for this reason, because of the last 5 years we've had 80 crashes, and we're trying to reduce it. So that's how we justify it.
Yeah, completely agree. Like I say, that's a sweeping statement, not just for the A19. It's a sweeping statement for how we set it across every road, because we have concerns about pretty much on speeding. It's probably one of the highest, you know, complaints we kind of receive through my service team. So it is a sweeping statement across. It's not just targeted at the A19. I completely get it, and obviously that's why treatments went forward. I don't know the background, because obviously I wasn't involved in the background. I've only been involved since May going forward. And as we said on the slides, the A19 is part of a wider scheme what's going to go forward. So it is, you know, the team will be updating all ward members of what's going to be happening on the A19. But like I say, I don't want to get bogged down on one particular road. It is a sweeping statement across the county, it is the county, it is the countrywide how we set speed limits. It's not just what Doncaster Council decide to do. It's something what we have to learn and go with and work with partners and work with guidance.
Thank you. Just one little separate one now. So it's to do with road safety engineering as well. When I was first elected, we had an issue in Fenwick, so it's a little no-through road. Members at residence saying how the village has grown in the number of kids. It backs straight on. Half of the villages are 30, half of the villages are 60, single narrow lane. So I get the compliance might be difficult, but I had a 95% petition signed by the residents to get that speed reduction down to 30 for the whole village. That was declined by council having too much work to do. So the road signage side of it was literally moving 2 30-mile-an-hour signs 400 yard down road. So the legislation side of it, there might be more, but actual boots on ground work side of it, there were 2 signs that needed moving. Yes, I get the compliance because it's a single narrow road and you're going to get your delivery drivers still ignoring it, but you've got 95% of a village who want it. Why are we not doing it as a council?
Good news, it is in the programme. So, yes, it is in the programme. I get, from a point of view, moving some signs, I get it. You've hit it nail on the head. There's a lot more to it. There's something what underpins everything, which then makes it enforceable for the police, which is the legal order, which takes time. And the service department's been very resource-stricken, and we've had a lot of work on delivering the other 20s throughout the borough, and we are been looking at them and how it's going about, but yes, it will be delivered.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got a question in regards to traffic calming measures. So I know you've mentioned like in the report about like speed humps before. Can you provide clarification when speed humps can be introduced on roads? Because I know from previous like discussions, it's always said as speed humps are moved away. Obviously, it's mentioned in the report. I just want a bit of clarification on the use of speed humps as a traffic calming measure.
Yeah, it's a recognised measure from the DFT. We primarily moved away from it a few years ago because of basically budgets, simple as that. And you know, the traffic calming schemes are an engineering scheme which costs quite a lot of money to install. So we are introducing them where we can, and when we do detect problems, if we get good compliance without needing them, then brilliant. If we're introducing schemes where we're not getting compliance and we need to try and slow people down and help get that compliance within it, then we do put different types of traffic calming in. There's all different types of traffic calming, as what I mentioned in my report, which has been used throughout Doncaster since '95. These actual regulations, which I'm happy to forward on to the self regarding the use of traffic calming on public highway.
Yeah, that'd be great for a bit more clarification, because I think the question it's just been an outright no when council have asked it, rather than saying what the alternatives are. And I think that clarification needs to come forward, because that's where the mixed messaging we've been told before, no, we're not doing them anymore, but it says we are able to. I think there needs to be a bit more, what type of roads can we look at, and have that discussion with ward councillors, because that's not particularly happened before when we've had previous discussions in regards to certain roads in our community.
Yeah, like I mentioned, I have to apologise for whatever's gone before myself, but we are looking at it a different way, different approaches. Obviously, we've signed up to Safe Roads approach, and all I can say is going forward, we'll try and be more acceptable and try and look at it on a case by case instead of just a blanket. No, we are introducing traffic calming as part of the 20 rollout on particular areas where we haven't got the compliance, so we are starting to use them more now.
Great, and I look forward to a bit more partnership working with the department as well. We'll move on to the next question, which is from Councillor James Church.
Relating to ensuring bus stops are safe and accessible, why are some clearly defined with markings and why are some not?
It basically depends down to what complaints we're getting, honestly. If a bus service is basically complaining that they can't get into a certain bus stop because of parked vehicles there, then we can combat that by using what's called a bus stop clearway. There's two different types of bus stop clearways. There's a 24-hour one, or there's a time restriction one. The 24-hour one is just using the road markings. A timed restriction is the road markings with a plate which tells the driver when that restriction's in operation. So if Simca or First or whoever bus operator is basically saying they're unable to gain access to this bus stop because of X, Y, and Z, then we investigate that. It's not something that we roll out throughout Doncaster as a rollout, because there might be a lot of bus stops which don't have any issues.
So if the issue was raised, you're open to dealing with it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we investigate it, and then we look at it, and then obviously we go forward from that, like any parking restriction.
Okay.
Thank you. And got the next question from Councillor Rob Dennis.
Thank you. New build estates can be left unadopted by highways for some years. In the interim period before adoption, who is responsible for road safety?
Ultimately, because it's not adopted highway, it does sit with the landowner. But what we do try and do is we do try and work our 278 officer or 38 officer who has a link between the developer and the council. We do try and get meetings together if there's a serious issue and trying to come to a agreed solution. But ultimately, the council can't dictate what that developer does on their land unless it's within their planning application. Now, all new planning applications go through our highways DC and also come through my department as well, and we make sure that current regulations at the time that they've been put through planning. Because you got to remember, sometimes these estate gets put through 10 years past, and it may not be up to full compliance to what maybe the new 22 regs say, let's say. So we at the time we make sure that it's got everything what basically meets criteria on that highway, different types of paving, tactile paving, etc., etc. So we do try and work with the developers and our 278 officers, but ultimately the land belongs to the developer, and it's for them to ultimately look at.
Thank you. So a number of estates will have sort of unfinished roads, uneven surfaces, etc., which can be dangerous to drive on. Does the council have any sway in terms of ensuring that roads are of an even level throughout the development of that whilst there's still houses being made?
I'm not able to answer that because I don't work within that service area. So I can ask our development control team to come back to you on that one, if that's okay with you, council.
Yeah, that's fine, thank you. And last one from me on this. If the residents in the area wanted certain traffic calming measures put in place, even if it's just, say, double yellow lines, the developer can't put those in place, would the council be open to working with the developer to have those yellow lines put in place before the roads are adopted?
Yeah, there's examples of that. I've worked within the council now for 20 years or so, and we have done various things in the past with regarding that. You know, the developers identified that it's off plan, maybe. I think that's what they call it, off plan, and they have then paid for the services for us to put a traffic regulation order in place for when the road is adopted.
Thank you. I'll follow up offline then. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions on road safety engineering? Is it short?
Yeah. So you touched on the A19 earlier about receiving the extra money. So I'll not dive in too much into it. Has the pot of money been spent, or is this further down the line? Yeah, and then I'll talk to you.
Is that, sorry to jump in, is that like regards to ward issues, or is that general just
It's in here as well for the...
To answer that really quickly, the finances were only awarded to us this year. We've only just started working on the pre-planning of the schemes. All ward members throughout the A19s will be contacted in the near future when the schemes have been fully schemed up, basically.
Moving on to road safety education. I know you've just talked about funding. Do you want to expand a bit more in regards to road safety education, Councillor Thomas-Moon? Or?
Yeah, just explain about the available funding. Is it government funding? Is it Simca drawn down funding? How does that sort of work?
Well, the bikeability is through a government funding scheme, so all the cycle training is funded by an external funding source. The staffing, because basically the road safety education is delivered by staff, not robots or anything along them lines, or literature. It is delivered by staff, and the funding comes. Those staff are funded via revenue fund, so that's funded by the council revenue. Hope that answers it.
Councillor James Church.
Claire, you explained earlier about the CCTV cameras outside the school, and there's 8 amongst 150 odd schools, which I know is really difficult. I suppose as councillors, if we had an issue with one of our schools, what mechanism would we use to say, could we request a camera at the school? And how often are these cameras moved? How efficient and how well does that scheme work, in your opinion?
Okay, I'll break it down, the kind of questions. So in terms of the schools, yes, we've only got 8, and yes, there is 150 schools across the borough. The way that we assess suitability is really down to sort of complaints that come in from the schools, working with our colleagues in the Safer Roads team, and sort of intelligence that we gather from our proactive patrols, because obviously whilst we've got the 8 cameras, we also have officers that go out and about in the borough and are tackling sort of inappropriate parking in them school mornings. In terms of the assessments, there's quite a few things that are taken into account. So obviously complaints is starting to give some intelligence that there's some problems around these particular schools. So other aspects that we need to have sight on is suitability. So is there actually a restriction enforcement? Because some of the schools don't actually have the clearway restrictions in place because they're not required due to having, you know, sort of ample space, maybe particular car parks in the locality. So them school gates aren't getting congested in comparison to some other schools. Clear visibility. So when we're assessing, we need to look at what structures are in place for the camera to be mounted. And that's generally, we look for our street lighting. If they're concrete columns, we've got an ability to actually put some cameras up there. We do need the new style version, which, as you're probably aware, there is that rollout happening across the borough. And again, sort of like I said, visibility. So is there any trees that are in the, you know, in capacity? Would that then influence? Because we need to actually target the vehicles that are obviously doing the offences, and to do that we need to have that clear line of sight. So as I mentioned, so there's a couple of things. So it's intelligence gathering as well as the assessment. You asked about sort of how often it's moved. We like to try and move them every term. So we like to get to a new school, target a different area to get that, you know, that compliance. That's what we're after achieving here, compliance from the motorists. There are on occasions where we find that the problem still persists. It's not reduced. So we'll look to keep them sort of still at the same school on the following term. In terms of effectiveness, so it's quite surprising when we first started, so when it first up and running, i.e., you know, the first day of term, we've got lots of non-compliance taking place. So we get high spikes, and then over the weeks, we see that decline, which is really good. That to me is what we want, that achievement of people choosing to park elsewhere. But as I mentioned, if we're not getting that, then we do decide to just leave the camera in place to make sure it's effective. As I mentioned earlier, we continue to sort of talk with the schools and make sure the schools are aware as well. We have had some hostility in the past, so we have had one cut down. That's the lengths that people do go to. But generally, as a rule, we are finding them very effective, and that people are, as in parents, I'm a parent, probably most of us are parents in here, we're choosing to sort of locate some more suitable positions and leave our school gate free and clear for children to cross safely.
Thank you.
I think you have another question, Councillor James Church.
Yeah. Could you expand on the new TROS initiatives for school, the experimental initiative? Just give us a bit more information, please.
Yeah, if you're talking about the school streets, and that's basically where we are doing some experiments at specific schools at the present minute. We're going to be using what's called an experimental traffic regulation order. We're going to be setting various different. At the present minute, we're currently busy getting other control data before we put that experiment into place, which we're hoping to put in place beginning of January. I'm looking at Councillor Covey over there because she's been involved in it. So, so yeah, I believe it's going to be in place around about January time, and it's going to be running for the maximum we can run it for is 18 months, and throughout that period we're going to get the data, see how it's working. Is it doing what we set out for it to do? Because, you know, if it's not working, what can we do to change things in that experiment? How can we put the controls in to try and make it work? And so, yeah, that's basically where we are at school streets at the present minute.
What is it?
Well, good point. What is it? Yeah. The idea around school streets is to basically close the road off for any moving traffic. So if a road is a cul-de-sac, it kind of works very well because there's very little through traffic going past the school. So if you use the school streets, it's a prohibition of driving. And the prohibition, so basically it's there to try and eliminate people parking up on those WR lines or parking outside the school, etc., etc. But the issues which what we're going to be looking at throughout this experiment is when residents live in close proximity to the school, how can we get it to work, basically?
Councillor Thompson, did you have a supplementary question as well?
Yeah, supplementary for the question before, sorry. Do we have a breakdown on cost to move the cameras? Do we have a figure on how much revenue has been generated since they've been implemented? And then could we also look at traffic parking signage for schools if the budget doesn't stretch to buy more cameras? So we could look at permanently putting up traffic signage at the schools saying that there's cameras, even though they might be every other term, because that might keep the numbers down.
Okay. In answer to the first two questions that you asked, yes, I have, and yes, I can get you that, but I don't have them to hand, and I can't. I'm not going to magic some numbers up for you, so I can get that back to you. In terms of when we're looking at our particular schools, we do need to put up the sort of traffic enforcement camera sign. We do that obviously with our colleagues in Safer Roads. Their position, they don't move, so we leave them up, so they always remain in situ whilst we move the camera out to give us the opportunity to obviously return back to those locations at another date. So they always remain there. Gives the illusion potentially to drivers that this camera is still present when there may not be, but that's obviously what we do whilst we move the cameras over to different locations.
Are they in place on all 150 schools currently?
No, they're in place in the schools where we've identified problems. So that's where they currently are, and they are the schools that we move around and utilise.
Councillor Rob Dennis, you have a question?
Yep. So what education has been undertaken around school parking, specifically with adults, and utilising other services which target adults, say, for example, speed awareness courses? Are there sections within those courses that specifically refer to parking and speeding around schools?
I'll answer some of that, but I'm going to have to see if my colleagues from South Yorkshire Police can answer the bit about the speed awareness course, because I've never been on one. Yeah, we do put basically banners on the fences to schools. That's something which is getting supplied by ourselves, Doncaster Council, and working with schools. Now, if there isn't one outside those schools, please contact me and we will try and get working with a school and get these banners up. So basically, they're quite large banners, probably the size of that table, which basically says the message of not parking outside schools. In previous years, we've done very well. It depends on, like I say, with the school, working partnership with schools, we've got leaflets out to the... We've targeted the new parents who's probably never had a child in school before, trying to get literature out to them via parent pay or doing leaflet drops for the parents in the kids' bags regarding parking restrictions. So we've tried in the past. I don't know where fully we are. I need to be speaking with our coordinator on that, and she's very keen to probably activate that. I do know, though, we do still do the posters, and that's in partnership with our South Yorkshire Safer Roads partnership. They supply us the banners as well. I'm going to see if Peter can ask, or one of my South Yorkshire colleagues can answer a bit about speed awareness.
In terms of the content of the speed awareness courses, I can't say categorically if that's included or not. My gut would say no, because probably particularly around road safety and school parking, it's an issue of hazard perception rather than the focus on the danger that the speed presents, if that makes sense. Accepting that we do sometimes then get frustrated parents who will accelerate quickly, but I'm a parent governor for a school myself, and actually when we look at the speed overlay of the parking issues, then generally because of the congestion, speed probably doesn't become a factor during the time that the parking issue presents. In terms of what education is being done more widely, we also use our community safety department, have some staff that will work with neighbourhood officers, and that can lead to some softer interventions, where there've been examples throughout the county where children have been used to particularly write out parking tickets for parents, just to try to get into the mindset. And equally, there's been other times that they've reversed that and had children rewarding good parking. So there's other education initiatives that'll be done, if there's a particular problem, and that really comes down to the local neighbourhood team tapping into the community safety department resource that's based at Lifewise.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor James Church, you have another question?
What involvement do children and young people have in road safety? I don't mean in terms of you going to them and speaking to them. How often are they listened to? For instance, you've got school councils where I did something in a local school and we were asking them about various things, but one of the things that they did mention, they spoke about road safety, they spoke about parking. How often are the children listened to?
I'm not going to try and say, give you an answer, because I honestly don't know. I know in the past we've received like letters from schools, which we've then looked into, investigated. What actions we've taken on them, I honestly don't know at the present minute in time. Something where I can go away and speak to my senior engineer in our road safety team and see what information we've got coming from there. Okay.
I think it's rather refreshing when you listen to the children and then they actually tell you the concern. We as adults should be concerned, but when you listen to the children, it's really good. So I think it's something that needs to be tapped into. And you can use the school council. You see, there's representatives from each year that the children will talk to as well.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. In my past life, when I was more involved in the actual engineering side of things, I know the neighbourhood teams in the past have got them out there with the speed cameras, with the jackets on, naming and shaming. I remember one scheme at Bessica where they were actually going up to the parents who were parked on the WR lines with the community police officer there, and actually naming and shaming parents to try and drum home the message of these, the parking arrangements, what goes on. So yeah, it is something that I'm aware it's happened in the past, but what's happening now, no, I don't know, unfortunately.
Do you mind if I just come in on that? Sorry. Just to add on to that, Councillor Church, when we sort of did the first round of the sort of enforcement cameras, I don't want to name drop, but Spar Academy School children actually got together and created a video in terms of parking and poor parking decisions around their school, and that was all sort of focused around the new cameras that was coming in there to help sort of, make it a safe school for them.
Thank you. I've got a question here about, I'm hoping this is the right terminology. So historically there's always been like a lollipop person at schools. Just wanting to know, do we still employ lollipop people as part of to do the road safety in some of the schools, or is that kind of different now with the academies in process?
No, CDC do still employ those employees. It has become more difficult. We do have various different vacancies throughout the borough. The main issue we do have is the recruitment to those roles, mainly just around the unsociable or the gap in the hours. I wouldn't like to go too much further into it because I'm not actually the service delivery of that team, but I just know of the historic issues we've had regarding the school crossing wardens. They've not been able to get them in. One particular crossing warden at my daughter's school unfortunately disappeared, and the post has never been filled for one reason or another. But it's not the fact that there's no funding, it's the fact that they just can't get people interested in the role.
Is there an opportunity to do recruitment, like publicity drive, if it's particularly in those community schools? I'm sure there would be somebody that would like to step up if they know there's a vacancy, particularly. Is there anything we can do to encourage that?
Yeah, I will speak to the crossing ward and patrol manager after this meeting and try and get a touch base with that manager to find out how she's going about trying to recruit people to them roles. Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify, the responsibility for school crossing patrol sits with Lee Galls, the service director in children, but there is a national problem in terms of recruiting school crossing patrol staff, just generally because of the kind of hours you're asking people to work, you know, early in the morning for an hour or two and the same again in the afternoon. We used to get a lot of retired people that used to undertake those roles. We probably all remember them ourselves from school. Again, Sam, I don't know what the local position is, but again, there seems to be a move away from actual physically having staff and looking at puffing crossings and other types of kind of physical measures around schools, which, you know, I suppose there are pros and cons to that approach. But yeah, again, can't talk about the context of Doncaster because I don't run the service, but I'm sure there will be a recruitment and retention issue just because of the nature of the job.
Thank you. Would it be possible to get the data to share on that?
Yeah,
so I imagine again, like picking up what you're saying, each school's different and the context different, but the person's always visible, and it kind of warns people off, as we mentioned earlier about the enforcement team going out as well. If you have somebody there, it makes that difference. Okay, so, yeah, go on, Councillor.
So Kelly just mentioned that, for instance, that school that your daughter's at, if it went so long, or there was no recruitment for the patrol, and that just went on month after month after month, when will we look at a physical intervention, actually doing an engineering intervention to make that school safe?
Well, there's no time limit on it. It's ultimately down to budget pressures. You know, these things aren't free. What we put in, you know, I know it's an eyebrow raising scenario, but if you don't have the money, you know, we've got 140 schools. I can't put a crossing outside every school, unfortunately.
But if you're not paying for the patrol person, then there's a saving that way, which would then justify the expenditure on the physical crossing, surely.
That's something what would have to be explored within the finances, because I don't know all the in-depth finance details of how it would all work.
I did, and I'll go and ask Lee Galls for some of his budget, shall I?
Councillor Mudderman-Rawlins?
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering whether the educational teams, so both the Crucial Crew and the Bikeability, whether they reach out to special needs education schools, and whether they reach out to the homeschooling networks, and whether there are days in place where homeschoolers could access those training sessions.
It's a really good question. I will find out and get back to you on that one. Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to traffic management again. Councillor James Church, I think you've got a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could you clarify how long it takes for a TRO to be put in place? For example, if WL lines are requested, following consultation agreement, and for installation, please.
There's no one straight answer, unfortunately. It all depends on the complexity of the traffic order. I've known traffic orders go in 3 months. I've known them take 18 months. It all depends on the complexities of the order. End of the day, the actual standard consultation period is actually 28 days. That's a legal consultation period, is on street notices in the paper for 28 days. It's all the other complexities around the traffic regulation order which takes time. The pre-consultation, the dealing if there's objections, depends how complex the objections are, how we're going to deal with the objections, etc., etc. But ultimately, there's no one clear answer. If you ever look on any kind of websites, most councils quote anything from 6 to 18 months.
Councillor Rob Dennis?
Yeah, so with newer junctions or resurfaced junctions, I think there's, because of recent changes to the highway code about priority of pedestrians or cyclists at junctions, some of the road surfaces have been done in such a way that it prioritises those. And so, for example, recently resurfaced Thorn Road junctions, on the top of Thorn Road where you've got either side, it's the hills going down. If you're a car coming over onto the brow of the hill, you've got to mount the pavement and cyclist area to have clear visibility. And that's causing confusion in those areas, leading to minor accidents that I know of so far, but potentially more serious ones as well. So who has priority on those sort of junctions? And again, has there been any education going on to sort of make people aware of priority on those junctions?
I can't really answer all of them because I'm not the designer of the scheme. All I can answer is all that scheme's been designed to the current standards regarding cycle lanes and cyclability, and taking into account the new highway code as well. That's something which I will take note, and I'll ask the design team to get back to you on that. Regarding the education side of things, apart probably from the government rollout of the highway code, then probably not now.
Thank you. I appreciate, Sam, you saying it's not sort of within your gift at the moment to expand further. I just wanted sort of noting that as a driver myself, I sort of know to be cautious, and I know that it's part of the ATC system, so we're going to have cyclists and pedestrians there. However, other people may not, especially if they're new to the area, and may just think, pull up to the junction as you would do to get clear visibility, and all of a sudden you've got a cyclist or a pedestrian there. And I think it is a safety concern, so thank you for taking that back.
Councillor Thomas New.
Thank you. If speed cameras and road signs are hampered by overgrown vegetation, how is this addressed? Is it police or council?
Many thanks for the question there. It ultimately is addressed by the council. We can do this in some different ways. If it's a highway tree or highway vegetation, then it's dealt with in our service areas through street scene. If it's a private tree or private hedge, again, that's done via different regulations and policies, which we then basically ask the tree owner or the landowner to trim back the hedges or cut back the tree. And we use, well, I'll ask Phil to come in on that one because he's a little bit more favourable than myself.
Yeah, ultimately we carry out monthly safety inspections of the classified highway network. The rest of the network will get an annual inspection at the least. We also act upon reports coming in from the members of the public. We've got a soft enforcement process in terms of vegetation on the highway, where we'd actually write to the residents with an informative letter in the first instance, requesting that the offending vegetation gets cut back within 14 days. Should we not get compliance, we would then serve legal notice on the resident and ultimately undertake works on behalf of the resident on a rechargeable basis if need be.
So you mentioned about public informing news. How do we go about that? Because I've got one that I need to report, that's all.
Yep, you can go through the normal channels, 736,000, or through the council online. There's a specific lagging set up for this. Offending vegetation is probably one of our number 2 prolific issues that we've got to deal with over any typical year. It's obviously seasonal, summer growth and everything else. So we've also got a lot of information out there, so we can send some flyers out. We've got social media campaigns regarding it and the like. So we try to educate as much as possible, but quite happy to take any information that you've got on that, councillor.
So, police, would you, if you've got cameras that should be working that aren't activating, are they monitored as well? And would you relay information about non-activation on a normal month to the council, which could be like vegetation and stuff potentially blocking view?
I think I'm not the person to answer that. So my counterpart is the head of the Safety Camera Partnership, would probably give you a very detailed and technical answer. But as Sam started at the start of the presentation, there's a very close working relationship. And again, I would believe that if there was If it's an active camera, now there might be the issue where some cameras, may no longer be active but haven't necessarily been removed, which I'm aware of in the parts of the county where I live. So there'll be lots of factors, but that will be a conversation between Scott Durney and local authority, SPOCs, and this regular dialogue.
Yeah, just to confirm, we are in very close working relationship with Scott's team, and Scott does make us aware if there's something which is obscuring his cameras or obscuring his equipment, especially on the mobile routes, where obviously there's not a fixed camera there, and we have to then look at various different things. So yeah, we do have a very close working relationship with them.
Are there any further questions on traffic management from the council panel? Okay, so we'll move on to parking service enforcement, and I think questions from you, Councillor James Church.
Thank you. 17,500 PCNs have been issued. Could you confirm how many of these have been in the city centre, and how does the parking service team cover the whole of the borough, or perhaps do they focus on hotspot areas?
So out of the 17,500, 12,034 PCNs were issued in relation to the city centre. Of these, only 9,336 are associated with contraventions that are on street. So the others, so the remaining 2,600, are associated with the pay and display car parks that we manage in the city centre. Car parks that we manage outside of the city are all free provision, as you're probably well aware, obviously to assist and support the various sort of villages that we have. So in terms of your next question for the parking services for the whole of the borough, how do we do it? So the team's made up of 14 officers. That's including a principal, 2 senior officers, 9 full-time and 2 part-time officers. We operate on mobile beats. So we have mobile beats where officers are out in the borough and some officers are out sort of within the city centre grounds. We work on intelligence and complaints for like hotspot locations. So then I mentioned in the presentation the 1,200 complaints that we get per year. We work on those because mostly they're indicating that there's some problems in certain locations. So we use that as a mobile beat hotspot. We also have enhanced our parking enforcement offer by supplementing our contractor. So we have WISE, the contractors mainly for dealing with our environmental enforcement issues, littering, etc. But also those officers that support that do go out and about in the borough. So whilst they're there, they will tackle sort of instant fines. So those, for example, parked on double yellow lines, etc. So they will tackle those. Taxi ranks, loading bays, etc. This partnership that we've got with our contractor kind of gives us that nice balance to work beyond sort of into the more borough areas and deal with more problems in those areas.
Councillor Rob Dennis.
Thank you. Claire, could you sort of outline any process the council has regards to dealing with licensed taxis or council vehicles that are found to be in contravention to any parking enforcement?
So if there's any of these vehicles in contravention, they will be issued with a ticket. So all officers, as I mentioned, consistent, fair, tackle vehicles that are inappropriately parked, be that taxi vehicles or our own fleet vehicles. If they've not been granted permission, some in-house Doncaster Council vehicle do have permissions to obviously park in certain locations due to the sort of demand of their service.
Thank you. And in regards to taxis, does the council have any sort of authority then to take that into consideration for not renewing or cancelling those licences?
So not in terms of not renewing, not giving taxi licences. What we'll do then as part of the taxi panel, sort of in-house officers, our compliance officers, will look at our own taxi policy where we'll issue penalties to our taxi drivers that have been in breach of a breach of a parking issue.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Is it a council or is it private company that does the parking now, he says. And then where's the line? So I've reported a few, and I keep getting told that's a police matter, that's a council matter. Can we have a breakdown of parking restrictions and rules and regs regarding the law and what's council enforceable and police enforceable? And then a little bit separate, but it's for council, we have a fly tipping webpage where we name and shame people. Would it be possible at doing a car parking one, name and shame, and post them bad pictures?
Okay, I'll try and remember some of your questions there. There's quite a few then. So in terms of the contract wise, so wise are employed by Doncaster Council fundamentally to pick up our or enhance our environmental enforcement crime. But what we've done really with that contract is utilised it to provide us with the opportunity when officers are out and about in different areas of the Doncaster Council, the city, they can tackle those, like I said, the instant issues. So that's in terms of the contract. In terms of our enforcement and the police enforcement, I'm going to surmise, and please tell me if I'm wrong in terms of what you're referring to, perhaps obstructed parking. Thought it might be. Okay, so obstructed parking, it's really a partnership. There's two elements of it. If there's obstructed parking where there's a restriction in place, so there's a line there, then that is something that Doncaster Council officers can enforce. If there isn't a restriction for us to enforce against, that's where we would work in partnership with our colleagues at the police service, because obviously there needs to be someone that's obstructed, and it may be that nobody's obstructed by that parking. It may be that the property residents, friends parked outside their driveway, their aunties visits, etc. So that's where we need to sort of understand kind of what the complaints relating to. In terms of the fly tipping web page, I think I'd need to take that back and consider sort of how we enforce, because obviously the enforcement of parking goes through the tribunal. It's not something that we do kind of take into court, etc., and sort of presenting sort of our prosecutions. So that's something I'd like to take back to the team, and when I come back to you with the other information, Councillor New, can I bring that as well?
Yeah, definitely. So can we not... So I've sent in multiple pictures of cars blocking highway and bad parking and parking between bollards on double yellow lines and stuff like that, blocking opposite bus routes, opposite junctions, stuff like that. Can we issue penalties on picture evidence, photo evidence, or not? Or do we have to be in place at the time to issue the ticket?
So the restrictions that you're referring to do need to be witnessed by an authorised officer. So the one I mentioned earlier, they're all trained. They've all got the parking sort of training. So it would need to be an officer that comes and witnesses those offences to issue the fine on the vehicle.
And then, so rather than me just sending pictures in all the time complaining, I need to tell everyone who's complaining to me about this dodgy parking to put in public complaints through the normal complaints procedure. So that'll then mean that I'm actually getting some enforcement out to Asken and Norton surrounding areas. Because currently, and then judging by the figures that we've got here, over 9,500 in the city centre, the outlying villages seem to have a fairly low number, I'm guessing.
So there's two things. Obviously, the city centre probably has more restrictions, more enforcement provisions than out in the borough, in the outlying areas. In terms of intelligence gathering, I said that we work on intelligence gathering. So if complainants are coming to you, then yes, please do send them through into us at the parking services, and that will start to help understand where these problematic areas are, so that we can sort of utilise our mobile beat enforcement. So officers will then be going out to those beats and tackling those areas.
Moving on to enforcement by South Yorkshire Police, Councillor Amy Dixon, have you got a question?
In terms of the mobile speed cameras, guns, what is the time frame from when a request is made for these, for them to actually be put in place, for someone to actually come and undertake them on a street?
As mentioned earlier, it's speeding is a very emotive issue then throughout all the communities. I'm sure probably features very heavily in each of your liaison with constituents, but there's not a set time frame because there's just a process to follow. There are a number of there's hundreds of community sites for concern. There are adopted sites for the safety camera partnership to use as well for the mobile vehicles, and then the factors that are considered in terms of whether they can be adopted or not. Ultimately, if a request is received, then there's a community concern database that's held within our safety camera partnership. There'll be consideration then as to that environment. So if it's 20-mile-an-hour zone, for example, and something that is more appropriate that could be dealt with locally via community speed watch, neighbourhood policing teams, there's a mechanism to send that to the local resource. We use a platform now which gives us the annual average speed for stretches of road. Previously, it would have been that we would have put speed survey sites out, but we've now brought that technology in, which technology works very similar to how you would get traffic congestion on a Google Maps survey and using that satellite data. If it exceeds the relevant, if that average speed exceeds the relevant thresholds from an MPCC perspective and our enforcement thresholds, then they could look to go out and conduct a review. But then there would be a health and safety review on the site, and all the different factors need to be considered then. So in relation to put a time scale on it, you can't really, because each case might be very different. But there is that map in terms of sites of concern, and again, the mobile cameras, if they can't adopt it as a permanent site, they do deploy in such a way where the community sites of concern are then referred through to my roads policing team as well. So it may well be that the camera enforcement teams don't have the resource to be able to get to it, but when my officers are on casualty reduction work, or if there's an operation with the neighbourhood team, we can then have sporadic enforcement at those locations as well. And I think you asked about community speed watch. Ultimately, as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, there's a paper going through at the minute where that's currently managed by neighbourhood policing teams, so that will be really subject to the demand upon that team and the resource within that team, which could be different throughout the borough. But if it's agreed that community speed watch becomes centrally managed under our safety camera and ticketing process partnership, then we think that could be achieved within a couple of weeks of a group requesting to set up. But again, because of the amount of interest as opposed to maintaining the buy-in, there will be it'd be on the groups then to be able to have a small financial outlay for the equipment that's required, because we can't just be buying a lot of equipment and sending it out without it necessarily being enforced or used.
Just to come back, I mean, we've got a road in where I represent, sorry to bring it to my ward, but I've been waiting 10 months, and we were told by like our neighbourhood teams we didn't have enough not PSPOs. What are they called? PCSO, it's close enough. Enough PCSOs at first in the area. Then we were told there were issues with the cameras, they needed recalibrating. I mean, 10 months on, this has still just not even been looked at. I just don't know what's happening to ensure these teams have got the equipment and it's working.
That was an issue that was raised in a pre-meeting I've had with Mr Thorpe in terms of the calibration of devices, which is simply just that if those need to be calibrated, that's something that I've just been made aware of, and we'll put that in place. In relation to the casualty reduction plan that we've pushed through, having the site adopted by the safety camera partnership is one thing, but to have that local offer between the neighbourhood officers and my staff working jointly, if you let me have the details, then I can just have that included. And again, that's the benefit where if there's resourcing issues within the neighbourhood team, then the local traffic officers. So I've got four teams. One of those teams is dedicated to Doncaster. And again, they can work with the local team and increase that capacity. If you want to share details.
Just as a supplementary to the community speed watch, does that also include like community groups and communities to get involved? I know they've gone out with the police and done the community like mobile where they stand on the side of the road. I know, again, it's been asked a few times, I'm aware, from meetings, and then that promise hasn't gone down. It sounds like if that's part of the pilot, I'm not sure if that's part of it, and that's why we're waiting for it, but have we got the timescales if so?
Yeah, so in its truest sense, the community speed watch should be independent of having an officer present. And actually the way that it's been running in South Yorkshire up until the 3 pilots that were mentioned was that it was reliant on having an officer with those local volunteers who wished to undertake the scheme. The paper that is being presented to our executive team is going to be presented on Wednesday of this week, and once we know that position, then that'll bring further clarity as to whether we're going to adopt the new approach, which will empower then those local groups to, get the equipment with a small cost, and then they can deploy independently with the relevant training.
Councillor Rob Dennis.
Thank you, Peter. And I was interested to know about the operator and mic work that the force are doing. And working with sort of related groups that are more into sort of recreational cars, that sort of thing. Sadly, a couple of years ago, I lost a friend who he worked in a garage, and he was testing a high performance car that he'd had in to do some work on. For whatever reason, lost control of the vehicle and sadly passed away. Are the police working with garages, mechanics, etc., regarding the retro mic operation, retro mic in the area?
We're not working with. Obviously, we have a finite resource, and it's striking that balance, Councillor, between taking my resources off of the streets and the roads and the demands that's upon us. So there are some officers within my department who are interested in those vehicle types, and again they use that interest as a common ground to engage with those that are driving the modified vehicles, just to try to promote it as a hobby rather than a danger to themselves and other road users. In relation to the garages themselves, then that would be very much fallen towards VOSA and Driver Vehicle Standards Agency, who we do work closely with. And actually, our partnership working in South Yorkshire is being modelled as good practice. As far as up in Scotland, this week we've received an email where the Scottish Authority wants to come down and see how we're working jointly, because it's being held as good practice from that partner agency.
Okay. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. You mentioned the 800 offences out of the 6,000 checked on the community working. Were they issued as fines or warnings?
I believe at the moment that is dealt with by way of an advisory letter that goes to those individuals, and it's that lower level intervention with the engagement, but equally that information's held, and there's further opportunities for that to inform decision making moving forward if that person is comes up again. So if there was a repeat offender within the community speed watch enforcement, Scott and his team will be able to refer that across, and we will, in problem solving, we talk about concentrate on the concentrations. So if there's one person who's presenting that threat, we obviously want to deal with that and deal with it proportionately. And again, when we're doing that joint speed work at the roadside, we can enforce, with the speed gun, we can stop those vehicles with warranted officers there and issue tickets at the roadside as long as the devices are calibrated.
Yeah, because it's an high number, really, isn't it? Out of 6,000 to 800, that's pretty stark, really. I don't know if it's the enforcement or tackling crime one. With the HGV wagon and the amount of times that I can't remember the numbers that I've not got it wrote down. But that's an amazing figure that you've got. Is that a constant, or is it just as and when, or is it a rolling thing, or
the operation that we run to target that?
Yeah, the HGV wagon, yeah.
Yeah, so that we run a suite of operations effectively, and then we rotate between, because it's the same resource that's being used to then the same resource to tackle the car mates as it is the heavy goods vehicle threat. So I would say though that's generally being run a couple of times a month and over a number of days at a time as well. And when that happens, we're looking at enforcement from early morning right through into early evening as well. So it's a really good coverage. And the team 2 that covered Doncaster area, that good practice has been held and then rolled out across the other teams within my department to try to adopt that approach in other parts of the county as well. So it's good persistent approach.
Because it seems from us and looking at figures and data, it seems like a good use of resources. Does that get passed higher up the service and stuff? And nationally, is that being looked at as good practice? And then does it not warrant itself being basically a full-time role to weigh how well it's doing and the amount of crimes that it's sort of catching, sort of thing?
Yeah, so it is held as good practice, and certainly within our partners are championing that. So as I allude, Police Scotland have been running similar operations, but not necessarily developed our relationship to the same degree that we have, which could be, that could be a factor of the people that are involved. But certainly it's highlighted, it's celebrated internally. In terms of that being a full-time unit, I wouldn't want to create a number of small units then to deplete from that core team, because we need to have that holistic offer. When we look year to date in Doncaster, the outlying factor in terms of road users who have been killed on the road is sadly pedestrians who have been struck by private vehicles rather than commercial vehicles. So I need to be led really by the data and to be able to flex to the data as well. Some forces do have commercial vehicle units, but I think those are probably the forces that have a larger department in terms of roads policing. So it's not something that I feel would be proportionate at the minute.
You just said about commercial. So are you looking at, so when you're in the HGV, I know it's harder to overtake cars on motorways and stuff, but are you not looking at cars down, or are you just looking at wagons?
Sorry, there's 2 operations I've spoken to you about, so the operations with the DVSA target generally commercial vehicles. So I thought that was the one that you were asking about. In terms of the National Highways operation with the unmarked heavy goods vehicle, we run that potentially 5-6 times a year. And that is, it's a National Highways asset. So National Highways have bought that vehicle and they loan it to numerous different forces. And that is, rather than that be full-time, it's a full-time resource, but it's each force bids for it effectively. So I have 2 different heavy goods vehicles in play.
And just a quick one from me. In regards to remote speed cameras, how much operation do you do at night time? Because we obviously see it during the day. I know not always at night, but I know sometimes I can hear it from places I live or the residents, or a lot of it's nighttime reporting in regards to speeding. Just curious, do they work operational during the night time as well, and how often do they go out compared to daytime remote?
Yeah, again, I wouldn't want to get into the realms of the capability of the technology for a couple of different reasons. One in which this is being recorded and promoted, but there is speed enforcement capability 24/7, and as I allude, generally that nighttime speeding is where we see typically the car meets and that temptation to race on the roads. We have the capacity and capability then to use equipment within our police vehicles to target that speeding as much as then the technology of cameras and devices by the roadside. So there is 24/7 enforcement. It might just come from a couple of different angles in terms of the resource that we use to achieve that.
Thank you. And moving on to tackling crime, Councillor Amy Dixon.
Just with regards to off-road bikes, and you've got a little paragraph in there. How do the areas? I'll just read my question. How does South Yorkshire Police prioritise areas of intervention where off-road bikes are a major concern?
Yeah, so it's a very emotive issue, and again, the off-road bikes are generally a blight across communities across South Yorkshire. So that core team that we have of a sergeant and 6 who have the capability to be on off-road bikes and quads to tackle that threat. They are not the only resource that can tackle the threat. So we can use other, I was previously a neighbourhoods inspector before, long lens cameras, other, traditional investigative approach that we would take to any crime type can be used to identify and enforce. So generally, the offer is quite consistent in terms of the neighbourhood teams across the county, and again, it's a priority in most areas. In terms of the Sergeant and Six, we have a deployment plan, which means that they're deployed in an equitable manner across each of the 4 districts or local authority areas, and we will concentrate on the concentrations again if we're looking from a problem-solving perspective. If we have an emerging crime trend or issue that involves off-road bikes, something that's more than the antisocial behaviour or the unregistered vehicles. For example, if there was a spate of robberies, then we would then target our specialist capability towards that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that just the officers on the bikes, we have then some tactics available within the vehicles, but we need to balance the proportionality of that with what we're looking at.
And then Councillor James Church, I know it was asked, I know you went into detail in the presentation. Do you still want to ask your question?
I don't know if you saw it last week, there was a report in the Free Press that suggested uninsured drivers in Doncaster was one of the highest rates in the country. They suggested maybe 4th. I think it came from an insurer's data. Does that suggest that you're catching more people in Doncaster, or do we have a problem in Doncaster that needs more action?
I've not seen the article or the statistics that would drive that, but we also have police liaison within the Motor Insurance Bureau. Obviously, we liaise heavily with them as the intermediary with them, with brokers and similar. And that is the partner that's engaged in the national operation that I alluded to. There are hotspots that can be provided, and again, I was recently at a conference and speaking to our police liaison. That's something that's on the 12-month plan for me now to bring that in and work more closely with the neighbourhood teams so that we can then start to target any particular areas where uninsured drivers are more prevalent, because for me that's a way that I can reduce death and serious injury on the roads.
Okay, has anyone got any additional questions? Okay, Councillor Thomas Noon.
Thank you. It sort of links into uninsured drivers a bit. Do ANPR cameras, they'll flash up, no MOT, no insurance, no tax, and then what's the response time of the police? Does it activate nearest thingy? Do we take it that seriously, or what? How does it sort of work with response time?
It's while it's a widely known technology, it's not something that I want to talk about on a recorded meeting, because clearly we're going into tactics there. But it's the prevalence of the issue is much more than just a response to an activation on any system. That there's lots of different ways that uninsured drivers can be identified, and some of that is with officers that are conducting checks, without any technology like that you've just mentioned. If that's okay.
And then I also have, so it's off-road bikes, but we have a massive issue in my ward, because we're a cut through from like West Yorkshire, North Yorkshire, to like down to Thorn and stuff. So we have a lot of off-road bikes, balaclavas, carrying weapons. I've had ones smashing windscreens, pulling knives, really bad. Do we have is that nationwide? Is that South Yorkshire wide? Trying to tackle them crime gangs and stuff. And then also, I was talking to my local PCSO yesterday about the increase in burglaries for stolen cars. So they're breaking in to take the cars. Do we have an issue with that? And then do we talk? Does the police, does the highways team sort of liaise with the burglary team to try and target that crime?
I'll take those ones, I think. So the first one was about the potential links of organised criminality, I think, wasn't it? And people using those things. We clearly have, I think at the minute, 13 or 14 mapped organised crime groups in Doncaster. A number of them are prevalent on the north and the eastern parts of the ward areas as well, so that may well come into it. And we do know that some of those organised crime groups are involved with serious acquisitive crime and not just your traditional sort of organised criminality and drug dealing, which we're normally associated with, so that's potential. And clearly those organised crime groups do have access to a variety of different weapons. So it is something we are acutely aware of, and we clearly have a very separate response from the traffic world to tackle that issue, which is done in partnership as well. The second point, I think, was around linking into burglary. We are seeing some spikes around vehicle-related burglary, and we have seen that presently for the last couple of months. That, in part, may well be in relation to some of the groups I've just talked about in the previous answer. But what the other challenge is, because of the geography of the area, we do get that transitional criminality coming in, particularly from West Yorkshire. I know of an OCG that's operating out of West Yorkshire that's targeting lorries, for example, on the motorway network, and that's a national problem. So there is regional joined-up work around that. We do have a dedicated burglary team in Doncaster that has clear links to everybody else, the other assets in the force, including Pete's department as well. So if there is intelligence that we're working on for particular groups and we think there's a need to bring in some vehicle assets like Pete might have in his team as opposed to what we have locally, then that liaison would happen in the background. So they are linked in that sense. And I've lost sight of your third question, sorry.
I think you mentioned about off-road bikes and particularly the crime involved with that. Now, moving away from the burglary issues, we also have that same conducts regular patrols in partnership with neighbouring forces as well. And that's to look at the impact on rural communities, local farmers and similar who generally suffer a lot of damage to crops. There's some really good arrests and seizures that have been made recently, some matters that are just pending in court, and hopefully you'll see the results of those coming in social media, which are testament to the fact that the officers are on the ground looking to take positive action and intervene to seek prosecutions, but equally working with those rural communities around target hardening and seeking to design out the issue and the level of damage and impact on that community.
Okay, I think that's all the questions. So thank you so much for your answers and being part of this session today. Just leaves us to do recommendations for the panel. So does the panel feel it has been given appropriate consideration to the information provided, and we're asking for continued support for the following areas: supporting the safer roads service delivery, and I've put additional in collaboration with councils and communities following a few further comments that need to improve kind of that liaison and kind of working with communities going forward. Working with partners on the countrywide strategy for Vision Zero, and supporting the further investments into road safety education. Is there any recommendations the panel would like to add? Review and scrutiny work plan of 2024 to 25 and the council's forward plan of key decisions. So we have got on top of our scheduled formal plan, we have got 2 informal sessions proposed, haven't we? We've got the internal drainage board meeting following the last meeting we had in August. That has been arranged, hasn't it, Chris, for November? And we need to look at organising a informal session regarding potholes. Obviously, it's a different separation to this meeting, but is also linked in a minor way. So, and that's going to be an informal session to be released, hopefully, potentially in January. Yeah, okay. And I think that's all the updates for this. Okay, and if that's questions or anything else, I'll end the meeting there. So thank you very much for your participation from everyone today. Thank you.